Welcome back to exercise 9J. We're going to be looking at surveying and sampling today. It's the last exercise for chapter 9. Now, there's just a few terms we need to understand. The first term that we need to understand is population. When you're talking about a population, you're talking about everybody in a group. If I talked about the population of Central Coast Adventist School, it means every person that goes to Central Coast Adventist School. If I talk about the population of Australia, I talk about every person that comes from Australia. If I talk about the population of the world, I'm talking about every person in the world. If I talk about the population of a house, I'm talking about everybody that comes from the house. So a population is everybody that belongs to a particular group. A sample is just a selection. So a sample is a selection from a group. So, for example, if I was talking about Year 8 students at Central Coast Adventist School, they're just a group or a part of the full school population, so that's a sample. Sometimes it's called a subset. If I talked about the people in New South Wales, they are a subset or a sample of the people in Australia. We have the word survey. Now, we can conduct a survey. A survey is when you actually get information from a smaller group than the population, and it's called a sample normally. So you can get a group of people. For example, if I wanted to do a survey of every student at Central Coast Adventist School, well, if I wanted to do if I wanted some information about Central Coast Adventist School, I might do a survey, and I wouldn't ask everybody. I might just ask randomly 100 people as they come in the front gate in the morning. That would be a survey where I just asked a group. A census means you ask everybody in the entire population. Now, how accurate surveys are can be affected by a lot of things. It depends on how many people you ask. It depends on the type of people you ask, whether they are biased or not. For example, if I wanted to do a survey on the boys' uniform and I asked a whole lot of primary school girls what they thought of the high school boys' uniform, well, that's not going to be a very good sample to choose. They're likely to be biased or not have a clue. So choosing the correct sample group or a good sample group is a good idea. And sometimes you can have what we call outliers, people that just have views that are totally radically different to everyone else. So let's get into some examples here and see how we go. So the first example says, a survey is conducted asking 100 randomly selected adults how many children they have. And the results are shown in the histogram that you can see there. So when we look at the histogram here, 50 people, that's our first column here, 50 people have no children that were asked. Then you go to the next column, this one here, 20 people have one child. The next one looks like it's about 15 people have 2 children. The next column, 10 people have 3 children, and 5 people were asked had 4 children. So let's go back to the right section. Let's get rid of that. Part A says, assume that this sample is representative of the population. In other words, assume that we've asked a good selection of people. What proportion of the adult population has 2 or more children? Now, how many people had 2 children? 2 children is in this column, and it goes up as high as 15. So 15 people had 2 children. For the people that had 3 children, it goes up as high as 10. For the people that had 4 children, it goes up as high as 5. So what proportion of the population has 2 or more children? Well, the first thing I need to do is figure out what 15 plus 10 plus 5 is, and that adds up to 30. That means there are 30 people or 30 adults were asked how many children they had, and 30 of them had 2, 3 or 4 children. So what proportion of the adult population has 2 or more children? 30 out of the 100 people that were asked is the proportion, which cancels down to 3 out of 10 if we actually cancel the fraction down. So 3/10 of the population have 2 or more children. If there was a group of 9,000 adults that we were interested in looking at, how many would you expect to have 4 children? Well, in our group of 100 people that we asked, we found 5 of them had 4 children. So we had 5 out of 100 people had 4 children. And if we wanted to apply that rule to 9,000 people, we'd go 5 out of 100 times the 9,000 people. And if you do that, you would get 450. So if you asked 9,000 adults how many you'd expect to have 4 children, we'd expect 450 of those adults to have 4 children based on our original survey. Now part B says, which of the following methods, we've got 3 methods below, which of the following methods of conducting the survey could lead to bias? Now bias means that the results are not entirely accurate because the people that were normally chosen are not a good balance of people. So method 1, if you asked people that were waiting outside of childcare how many children they had, that could be bias, definitely bias. Why would it be bias? Well, that would be bias because if you've got parents waiting outside a childcare centre, they've probably got at least 1 or more children. So that's the reason why that would be bias. Method 2, what if you were asking adults about how many children they have if you were asking them coming or at a nightclub? Well, that would be bias as well because if they're at a nightclub, they're quite possibly young adults and they quite possibly don't have children. So that could be a biased group as well. So method 1, you're asking a group of people who probably do have children. Method 2, you're asking a group of people who probably don't have children. There's no guarantees with either group. Method 3, if you chose 100 adults at random from the national census and noted how many children they claim to have, that would be a fairer way of doing a survey, trying to randomly find how many children adults have. So there wouldn't be bias using method 3, but there would be using method 1 or 2. Right, time for you to try working your way through exercise 9J. As always, enjoy. Bye for now.